You want to buy a house in Bellevue. How much do you need to earn to be able to afford that? 100,000 a year, 200,000 a year, 500,000 a year? Well, let's jump into some numbers, get some clarity, and have some fun with this. And when we're thinking about how much you need to earn to buy in Bellevue, I think it makes sense to analyze it in terms of entry points into the market. So the first one will actually be renting, because it's the easiest way to just get into a home and it gives us a baseline to compare to buying. The next point is the lowest part of the market as far as the financial cost. So what is a reasonably cheap condo in Bellevue cost to buy? And then third, a single family home at medium price. We have kind of the most selection. There's a big pool of homes there. So medium price single family home. And then have some fun at mid-range new construction luxury. What will that cost? And by the way, typically this is a highly personal conversation and consultation that we have with my clients. You know, bring in a lender, bring in your financial advisor, whatever. Understand, you know, your financial situation, what you're looking for in a home, your lifestyle, and all that. That we determine, you know, what are we going to find the best options for you. So I bring that up because when we talk in this video, we're going to set some numbers. They're not hard, definite thresholds that you have to make to live in Bellevue. So if you're under that, there's so many strategies to still be able to buy in Bellevue. And even if finances aren't a concern, Bellevue just may not be the right place for you to live. So that's where the consultation comes in, that more personalized part of the conversation. So today we're just trying to connect, have some fun, and we'll see where this goes. Let's talk about renting in Bellevue. According to apartments.com, an average one-bedroom apartment in Bellevue costs $25.50 a month. And then we're going to use the number of 30% of your income being rent, being affordable. So we'll say we're limiting our rent to 30% of our income. That's not always what we choose to do, right? But for this video, that's what we're going to do. So if $25.50 a month is 30% of your income would be $8,500 a month or $102,000 a year. So we come up with $102,000 per year to rent an average one-bedroom apartment in Bellevue. What about a single-family home? Again, apartments.com says the average three-bedroom single-family home rents for about $4,300 a month. So doing the math on that, we come up with $14,400 per month in income and $175,000 a year in income to rent an average three-bedroom home in Bellevue. So what do you think of that? $100,000 for a one-bedroom apartment, $175,000 to be able to afford renting a home. Of course, we're not talking about utilities or parking fees or, you know, all the different variables that come into our budget, or even if you're comfortable with the 30%, we're just trying to get like a baseline to compare. So about $175,000 just to get into a home in Bellevue. Let's compare that with buying in Bellevue. And we need to lay some groundwork here first because the topic has so many variables. There's so many things that we're making assumptions on that would normally be very personal. First thing is that when we're talking about buying, we're talking about using a loan to finance the purchase of the property. Typically, you're going to need some cash for things like down payment, closing costs, earnest money. We're not going to get into those one-time costs because we're thinking, how much do I have to earn? So we're thinking about monthly expenses and monthly, and how that translates to your monthly income and budget or your yearly income. So real quick, I want to talk about some of those monthly expenses and specifically how that relates to Bellevue. The biggest one, of course, is going to be your mortgage payment, monthly principal, interest, taxes, and insurance payments. We want to pull out the taxes portion of that and talk about that. That's the part that is kind of custom to Bellevue, the property taxes. As a percentage compared to the national average, Bellevue's property taxes are kind of mid-range. And I think when we're talking about the property taxes, we need to bring that into more context with the other taxes that we have to consider. So Bellevue has really high sales tax. So potentially mid-range property tax, but that's made up for with high sales tax. The sales tax rate here is 10.3%. A lot of places nationally, they say the average is 4 to 7, or like some states have no sales tax. So that is something to consider. But then it's also balanced by Washington State not having an income tax. There is a caveat. Starting in 2028, for those who make over $1 million a year in income, that portion over $1 million could potentially become taxed. There's some that say that will be repealed, but for right now, it'll become effective in 2028. But generally, if you make under $1 million, you aren't going to have an income tax. So that can balance out the high sales tax and the mid-range property tax. All right, so what's involved in the property tax? Well, that's set by King County, and it includes a big list of levies and services that are provided out of that tax. So it goes to the state school fund, the local school fund, hospitals, library, emergency services. A lot of those things are covered out of that property tax. So what is the actual tax? How is it calculated? Well, King County puts an assessed value on the property. That's a value that the King County puts on specifically to determine your tax rate. The tax rate in Bellevue is approximately for every $1,000 of assessed value, you're paying $7 to $8 in taxes. There is some slight variation in there. So another way to say that is it's 0.7 or 0.8% of the overall assessed value. Let me give you a hard example. If the assessed value is $2 million times 0.7 or 0.8%, then your range is about $14,000 to $16,000 per year in property taxes. So that you can see that's a significant number. It's an important part of our budgeting to figure out what can I afford, what do I have to earn to live here. We're not going to get into some of the other costs like maintenance costs, utilities, and all that. We're just going to be looking at the big one, the mortgage, and including property taxes. One more thing we have to discuss is debt to income ratios. So when you're getting a loan, the bank has limits on how much of your income you're allowed to be spending in debt. Specifically on the mortgage, they'll let you go as high as 40 or 45% in some cases. So you can see how that number can really skew our calculations of what you need to earn. If you have a higher ratio there, then you need less income to be able to afford that. We're going to stick with what we did with rentals. So 30% of your income going towards the housing costs, going towards the mortgage specifically, which is pretty conservative. So that's going to bump our income numbers kind of higher than they have to be. Again, it can be very customized and personal to you. But that's what we're going to use for this analysis. All right, let's actually get to the numbers of buying a condo in Bellevue. So first thing we need to determine was, what does the condo cost? Now, we're not going to use a median number for condos because looking at the data, just in June of 2026, a month prior to making this video, 34 condos and townhomes sold in Bellevue. When there's so few sales, one sale can really skew the median, high or low. So I was looking at what's a reasonable threshold for a price that you can get a condo in Bellevue, and it's a reasonable place to live and move into right away. So you can get condos as low as $450,000, $500,000. But of those 34 that sold, 12 of them were under $600,000. That's pretty good. That's a good selection. And now you have an opportunity to figure out what works for you. So we'll use $600,000 as kind of our threshold for a condo. Now, what do you get for that? The average condo at that price was about 40 years old, 875 square feet, anywhere from 1 to 2 bedrooms, and came with at least 1 parking spot and sometimes 2. And the average HOA dues were $600 a month. So $600,000 for the purchase price and $600 a month for the HOA dues. Now, right now, interest rates are kind of high. So when we start figuring out the mortgage calculator, we're going to use a 6.7% interest rate. If we buy this condo at 3% down, that's kind of like the minimum. You can sometimes get 0 down depending on the circumstances, but we're going to use 3% as your minimum down payment. All right, so how does that break down? The total payment comes out to about $4,400 a month, including principal and interest, taxes, property taxes, insurance, and I think I mentioned mortgage insurance. Now we tack on our HOA of $600 to that, and we come out to $5,000 a month to buy a $600,000 condo in Bellevue. $5,000 a month. If we consider that as 30% of our income, we come out to needing to be making $16,600 a month, which works out to just about $199,000 per year, or $200,000 a year, to buy an entry-level condo in Bellevue. By the way, if we haven't met, I'm Daniel McDougall. I help people who are moving to Bellevue. I'm your local real estate expert in the Bellevue-King County real estate market. All right, let's jump into buying a single-family home. What's that going to take? Well, the median home price in Bellevue is $1.75 million. And we're using median price because that's going to give us a wide selection. We're not just trying to come in at entry level, what's the lowest, or whatever. We'll play with some higher numbers too. But the median gives us a wide selection of homes. So some of the averages there, the average size is 2,700 square foot. We see them smaller and bigger, but that's the actual average. Usually 3 to 5 bedrooms, 2 to 3 bathrooms, 2-car garage, usually 30 to 40 years old. There are plenty of move-in ready homes at this price, but there's also some that, maybe the kitchen's dated or whatever, there's some quirks. The lot size can vary, bigger or smaller. But this is a reasonable pool of homes at the 1.75 price point. So let's break down the numbers. And we're gonna do this by assuming that we're putting 20% down. You can do it with less, you can do it with more, a lot of people do. And when we're considering the payment, we have to keep in mind that we're now in the jumbo loan territory, and that usually carries higher interest and some extra costs. But at the median price of 1.75 million, 20% down, our loan amount will be 1.4 million, and our interest rate today would be about 7.25. So our total payment estimate comes out to about $11,000 a month. If we take that and put that in that 30% of our income ratio, then our income would need to be about $36,600 a month, which comes out to annually needing to make $440,000 a year to get a median single-family home in Bellevue. So what do you think of that? If you are feeling like, wow, that's really high, you're under that threshold, but keep in mind that we're being pretty conservative with our numbers, and there's lots of strategies to get a home in Bellevue that you don't have to make that much. But using these basic numbers, that's what we come up with. Let's round it down. We'll say $400,000 to buy a home in Bellevue. Let's get into that mid-range luxury new construction in Bellevue. You can get into a new home in Bellevue at $2.5 million. But we're going to use the number of $3 million for this discussion because that's where the market really opens up. There's a lot more selection. There's beautiful new construction in Bellevue around $3 million. You get all kinds of different amenities for whatever is important to you in your lifestyle. So we use $3 million. And again, we're considering 20% down payment. So that puts our loan amount at $2.4 million. That interest rate would be about 7.5% today. So your total monthly payment would be $19,000 per month, which comes out to needing income of $63,000 a month, which means annually, using our model here, you need to make $750,000 to be able to buy a $3 million house in Bellevue. What do you think of that? I love your feedback. Stay tuned because we'll have a video on some strategies that if you're under those thresholds, how you can still get a house that makes sense in Bellevue. All right, well, I hope you had fun. Thank you so much for watching and take care.